Hey, good evening, Christian. How's it going?
Good evening, Eric. Things are great. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying the rock wall addition to the garage
I love
gym.
it. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty slick, dude. It's a nice training wall. Over time, I'd like to expand it and actually have real incline, but right now it's just a vertical wall. I don't know. It's like 6 by 6, or actually 6 by 8, pretty decent size.
Nice.
Um,
There you go.
and it is definitely smoking my forearm, so it's doing its job.
Nice. You got some reinforced studs back there to keep up all that muscle mass you're hanging off the wall?
Yeah, you mean the adiposity that just comes with being in your mid 30s?
What are you talking about? No. No, I do like it. It does look really cool. I know I would fail immediately at that if I tried, but good for you, man. Good for you. Anyway, so I have two things on the podcast tonight to discuss. For those who are the OGs of the Flex Metal podcast, if you remember way back to when Christian and I first started, we used to talk about patient stories, and they were probably terrible podcasts. And I had a pretty wild patient story today that I wanted to talk to you about, Christian, and get your take on it, but also be able to discuss it for people listening and see kind of the behind the scenes work, so to speak, of what's going on. So, to set the stage, I have a lady in her 50s who is an ER nurse, and she was working last summer, and there's a spillage on the floor, and they were rushing for an ER case. She slipped on the floor, fell backwards on an outstretched hand, and hurt her shoulder. After hurting her shoulder, she could barely move it, super painful. Ended up going on workers' comp because she couldn't lift anybody or work with anybody. MRI showed what seemed to be like a small tear in the rotator cuff, but otherwise nothing significant. And so we treated it conservatively, and she was doing well. She was getting better, but slowly. Still like in a lot of pain, but she was getting more functional, more strength back, etc. after a couple of months of rehab. She was going to see an orthopedic surgeon, and this was then back in like November, and the surgeon's like, we should operate on it and, clean things up basically, right? Which I was like, okay, yeah, we're not going to really fix anything, but we're going to go in there and clean some things up and, in theory, should be better after, right? After the surgery, she comes out. They end up doing like 4 different things. They did like a subacromial decompression, a biceps tenodesis. They cleaned up one of the rotator cuff tendons, and then they ended up like debrising the joint. And I'm like, that's kind of a lot of stuff. Gets out of surgery, way more painful than before going into surgery, having a tough time with that. But we start to get to a point where she's starting to get more functional again. And then the surgeon goes, let's speed up this process and let's do a PRP injection. So, and then gets a PRP injection done. And that was about probably 2 months ago. And ever since that PRP injection, her shoulder pain, strength, function has just nosedived. And now she's not doing the best. Having a really tough time with the shoulder ever since the injection. And she went and had a checkup with her surgeon. I think it was like a 12-week checkup or something. And the surgeon goes, I want you to do physical therapy down here in the cities. And she's like, one, that's a 70-mile drive one way for me to do PT, so no. And she's like, 2, I really like my therapist. I trust him and I want to stay with him. And he goes, fine, but I want you to see a different therapist at the clinic. And she goes, no, I want to stick with my therapist. I trust him. I know what he's doing and all that stuff. So then he gives her his business card and says, next appointment, I want you to give my card to your therapist and I want him to call me so I can ask him like what he's doing basically and like discuss the plan of care. I'm like, okay. So I end up talking to the surgeon. I'm just, I'm looking for more ideas because he's like, I can't really figure out what's going on with her. And it ended up being like a really productive conversation with the surgeon and like not bad at all. But basically what we decided is I agree with the surgeon. He does think that she's starting to get some frozen shoulder now, which she fits the demographic for a frozen shoulder. So frozen shoulder is when that shoulder starts to get really tight and painful. So she definitely fits the demographic of someone who could get a frozen shoulder. So I don't necessarily deny that. And now basically our plan of care has shifted to reduce our intensity of therapy in regards to exercises. Let's work on calming down the nervous system, doing a lot of hands-on manual therapy and stretching. And I was like, what about dry needling? And he was like, love it. Let's start doing some dry needling each visit. And so that's kind of the plan going forward with this lady. But I guess that's my That's my patient story. What's your initial gut reactions to that, Christian?
I thought you were gonna say she had some crazy thing happen, like way up in her neck from the fall and just got discovered many months later.
Yeah,
I
I kind
mean,
of wish it was that.
yeah, I think she just, yeah, she falls into that unfortunate camp of things hurt longer than you'd like, and you have to make a decision on whether to escalate or not. You know, it's all cost benefit analysis. Ideal world, you wouldn't have done that surgery because every single one of those things that she had done might have just gotten better had she continued PT. And you don't like hearing that she
And
got worse after surgery. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's what that's something that I told her too. I said, before surgery, we were starting to get pretty functional. We were starting to get less pain and all that stuff. And it was kind of this push from the workers' comp and the surgeon to get the surgery. And today she even voiced that too. She was like, yeah, I agree. I think if I were to go back and do it, I wouldn't have got the surgery because I think that we were, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with the conservative rehab.
Yeah, but like, as the patient in pain going through a PT session, doctor session, one after another, I get why folks have to make that decision on, okay, I'm just going to try something else for a while and see what works. But thankfully, her surgery wasn't too involved in terms of like major rotator cuff repair. So I think she's going to bounce back. But yeah, it just sucks that you add on the layer of possible frozen shoulder, which, yeah, she does fit the demographic, female, middle aged, recent trauma. Maybe she has the other risk factors like diabetes or thyroid issue. And yeah, just like a recipe for more problems. But it is what it is. You're doing what you can. And also like hearing that the surgeon was pretty cool. I honestly
Yeah.
haven't had a bad experience with a surgeon face to face. I've heard like a couple things from the patient, but nothing really. They're mostly chill people.
That was topic number one. Topic number two tonight is we're going to blind react to the new ACSM exercise guidelines that I didn't know about, came out, and sounds like you were unaware of it as well, Christian.
Haven't seen them.
Until I saw a post from 7 hours ago from Adam Meekins, who is a physiotherapist in the UK, and I really like him because he doesn't put up with the bullshit. Right. And so he put out a post of basically recapping what the new guidelines are. So let's discuss them. I'll go kind of page by page and then just talk back and forth about it. Okay. All right. So the first thing is the American College of Sports Medicine, ACSM, has at last updated its guidelines on lifting weights by combining the findings from 137 systematic reviews covering more than 30,000 participants. All right. So here are some key messages first to take away, then we'll dive into the details. Number one, many different approaches work. Number two, the effective dosages are often much less than you think. Number three, individualization, adherence, accessibility, and enjoyment matter the most when thinking about workouts. And lastly, helping people do resistance training is far more important than obsessing over the details. So those are the key messages that he posted on. Let's start with the first one, Christian. Many different approaches seem to work. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And that ties into the adherence piece where the goal is to make your body move more weight over time. You need to feel that difficulty, that struggle of moving an external object. And that can be done literally any way. So like yoga, Pilates, CrossFit, powerlifting, Planet Fitness, just going through machine after machine. I don't care really how you do it, so long as you're adding more weight over time to truly improve your overall strength. So I'm fully on board with that. Of course, you and I have our biases on which versions of resistance training we like the most, like to give clients the most. We're clearly more barbell based and dumbbells and body weight type movements, more gymnastics style, because for us, it's just like what we find fun, what we've studied the most. And on frankly, to me, it's like the most effective and most efficient way to go about it, but it isn't the most fun for everyone. And I think that you got to really lean into that. What's going to drive that fun and that consistency?
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to or ties into rehab as well, right? You can discuss this in terms of, for example, low back pain. We talk about this with low back pain. Many different approaches work. and it's about what's going to make the patient adhere to it and enjoy it. And not only that, but buy into it. Right. And the same thing goes with training. So let's just stick on training for this example. If you're working with someone who wants to be more active, but they don't like to lift heavy weights or be in like a traditional gym type setting, and then it's not going to make much sense to force them into that setting and force them to be like, no, you have to hit barbell and dumbbell and kettlebell workouts and, pull ups and different variations of push-ups and all these other things, when like maybe they find Pilates to be super intriguing. And so the same kind of goes back and forth for either rehab or also, in this case, working out. So then to go on to the next one, and then after this we'll move on, but the next point of the key messages is the effective dosages are often much less than you think. What does he, I guess, first of all, Christian, what does he mean by that? The effective dosages are less than you think.
The previous ACSM guidelines recommended total body strength training 2 days per week. So in terms of dosage for like weekly frequency, that really seems to be the amount that works really well for a lot of beginner to intermediate lifters. You can make meaningful strength gains doing some movements 1 time per week. I do not like that. I think that you're just like doing the bare minimum. And chances are if you're newer to training, you probably aren't training hard enough or well enough to really reap the rewards from that. And so I think 2 days a week is my favorite amount for someone who's just getting into it. Ideally, I would say 3 days is like that sweet spot for me, for most people. But so that's partly what they mean by dosage. The other part is that people can get meaningful strength gains from doing one working set, which we call also an effective set or effective reps, meaning a certain amount of reps at a certain weight that yields adaptation. And so you can make meaningful gains with one set and only a handful of reps, like 3 to 5 reps for building strength. I'm not talking muscle size or muscular endurance. Strength. Ideally, it's kind of like weekly frequency. I think if you did 2 to 4 sets per exercise, landing somewhere in 3 for most exercises, you're going to certainly be making some progress, meaningful progress at a decent rate. But that really is it. And that's what I try to tell all the different runners that I work with. I'm like, if you're running, even at an intermediate level, you want to focus on running 3 days a week, 4 days a week, you only need to strength train twice per week. And we can get the strength that you need done within 30 to 60 minutes. And so to me, that's not a huge ask. And for the massive payoff you get for your metabolic health, your physical health, mental health, all those different benefits that you get, I think it's totally worth that minimal time investment.
Yeah, I would agree. Very well said. Okay, let's go on to more specifics, right? So he talks more specifically about strength, hypertrophy, power, and then kind of an overall summary and limitations of it. So let's go through each of those. So the first one is strength, all right? So what do you want to focus on? This is what the research studies and the guidelines tell us we want to focus on for building strength. 2+ sessions a week, kind of like you were saying, 2 to 3 sets per exercise, ideally heavier load, so greater than 80% 1 rep max, large or full ranges of motions, bigger body movements, and doing key lifts earlier in the session. So those are going to be things like squats, bench press, deadlift, hip hinges, different pulling exercises such as rows or pull downs, right? So those are more of the multi-joint type movements that usually have heavier loads to them. And so yeah, two sessions a week, 2 to 3 sets, greater than 80% of 1 rep max, big movements. I feel like that kind of sums up what we already kind of know about it, right? I mean, I don't think that's like any groundbreaking, jaw-dropping information.
No, I think it's pretty standard at this point. If you've been doing any kind of training for folks or training for yourself and reading up on the research over the last, I guess I've been learning this stuff for a decade now, but that is all really consistent with what we've seen over the years. And I think the industry has shifted more towards that over time. For a while there, people were going way too high volume. You're trying to get into 4 and 5 sets, sometimes more than that. People were going more of the tonnage route for a long time, where you're just trying to get just a total number of reps, even at a lower percent of your 1 rep max, because it was thought that just the overall amount of weight that you moved, regardless of how close it was to your 1 rep max was still gonna yield a lot of strength gain. And the truth is that if you wanna really tap into strength adaptation, you need to be above or at or above 60% of your 1 rep max, or otherwise stated, you need to be at a 6 out of 10 rating of perceived exertion or 4 reps in reserve whenever you complete your set. Those are 3 different ways to think about what amount of weight to use with whatever exercise you're doing. So that's the minimum. For me, the best area to be training at, and I recommend for everyone that I work with, is going to be 7 or 8 out of 10 RPE, or 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max. That is consistently, those are the perfect numbers for building strength while also keeping your fatigue burden manageable. Because what happens when you get to the 90% or 95% of your 1 rep max is, yeah, you're still definitely doing a lot of weight that's going to yield adaptation, but it comes at a much greater fatigue cost, which you then have to pay in a deload week, or like if you kept trying to do 90% plus work for a long time, you just get beat to crap. And like I personally did it for a lot longer than I should have, and it's not very fun. And like frankly, you don't make progress as quickly as you'd like because of that fatigue burden, because you're very mentally stressed. It's just messes you up mentally, and then physically you just feel like absolute butt. So I like every single one of those guidelines. I guess the last one I'll say is I love that they made a comment on trying to put the higher yield movements earlier in the workout. The way that you typically think about it when building out someone's program is you go warm up, power, strength, accessories, supplementals, other whatever stuff you care about. And the reason is you're going to be your most effective, like your most efficient, effective reps come when you're most neuromuscularly fresh. And that's going to be earlier in the workout. So you prioritize high skill and high power movements, and like the movements that are the most bang for your buck in terms of strength earlier in the session, because you're less fatigued. You just get more out of them. And so you put like those bigger barbell lifts in the beginning whenever possible. And all my training clients know that I do that. And I recommend that they do the workouts in order whenever possible and not like skip around.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think especially from the standpoint of the neuromuscular, right, or just nervous system in general. I think we underestimate or underappreciate how much that nervous system comes into play when we're strength training and programming and all that stuff, right? If you try and go all out for weeks on end, like not only is your physiology in your cells in your body to create energy has to keep up with that. Not only do your muscles, contractile components have to keep up with that, but also your nervous system has to keep up with that. And we see things overtraining. That's the word I was looking for. That overtraining can really come from that nervous system as well. And so, especially if you're looking at athletes, high school athletes, college athletes, or like a busy parent, right? That they got a lot of other stuff going on, if it's school or jobs or family or whatever it is that is going on in the background that isn't just training, that's also expending at their nervous system. And so making sure we're balancing out all of that stress. And then he goes on to talk about things not to worry about. All right. So don't focus so much on these things. I kind of like this because it feels like they're subtle jabs at kind of the fitness industry, and especially like on socials. Some of them I think is going to be a little interesting, but one, training to failure. Don't worry about training to failure. Two, don't worry about machines versus free weights. Three, don't worry about training on unstable surfaces. Four, this is where I kind of get a little eyebrows, but don't worry about time under tension. Don't worry about morning versus evening. Don't worry about short versus long rest periods. Don't worry about different set structures. And don't worry about blood flow restriction. So there's a lot of things not to worry about. To me, that's saying, hey, go into the gym 2 to 3 times a week, do a couple of sets at relatively high intensities, take breaks as you need it, do big body movements, and in general, you're going to be seeing the gains, right? The one that got me, and I kind of said that already, was the time under tension there, Christian. Because I guess to me, just in theory, it always makes sense that we want more of that time under tension when it comes to getting muscular adaptations or even tendon. I think especially tendon adaptations at time under tension. But what about you? Did any of those kind of don't worry about it bullet points stick out to you?
I'll stick with the time under tension one. I think that he is mentioning that because historically the thought has been that you just need to spend time under tension without much consideration for the amount of tension. And the amount of tension is really going to be a measure of the percentage of your 1 rep max that you're working with, your RPE or your reps in reserve. And the training paradigm or like model or whatever focus we're trying to get across to people is that what matters are effective reps. Are you training with the right amount of weight? And it has to be hard enough. So the total time that you spend with weights that are below the threshold to drive adaptation, so below that 60% of your 1 rep max, it's just kind of you're just wasting your time. Like you're not going to get a ton of benefit from doing it. You might feel like you're doing something, you might get tired, but it's not really the signal your body is or needs in order to reach your goal, which is to improve your muscular force output, your strength. And so if you disregard time under tension and instead think about, am I hitting the right number or like roughly the right number of sets and reps and then at a weight that is appropriate, you're gonna get gains. Like it's just if you just do that, you are going to get better. That's what you have to do. And so like forget all the other crap and just focus on that and you're gonna be good. And I also just gotta remind myself that he's talking to beginners. The
Mhm.
ACSM guidelines are for absolute beginners. They're not for intermediate to advanced people. They're not for folks like me and you who like to train. It's just like try to help people sift through the noise and say, this is what you need to do. This is what works. If you start here, you are going to make progress. And then from there, we can add complexity.
Yeah, it's a great point to bring up. Going on to the next one, optimizing hypertrophy, right? So for those who don't know, hypertrophy is building bigger muscles. And so for some people, this is what they want to work on, right? They don't care about strength and power. Those things don't mean much. They want to get bigger muscles. And so, hey, let's talk about it. First one, focus on higher weekly volumes, not just load. So this is more about volume, right? 10 plus sets per muscle group per week. Break that one down here in a second. And then eccentric load or eccentric focused work. Higher weekly volumes, not just load. We already talked about that a little bit. We want overall more work being performed in a weekly time frame. And then what does he mean, Christian, by 10 plus sets per muscle group per week?
Yeah. It doesn't take much to build strength in terms of total time investment. You just have to be pushing heavy weight around and you're going to get the strength gains. You'll get some physique change too, but if you want to really change your physique, you want to focus on hypertrophy. When you start moving to hypertrophy, what you'll find is that you have to put more work in. It takes more time. It's just the signal required to make your muscles grow is different. And for strength, a lot of people have a hard time with it because it's uncomfortable, it's challenging, it can be scary. Like it's freaking scary moving a heavy barbell with a squat sometimes. Like it definitely can get to you, especially if you're new and uncoordinated. But hypertrophy is more approachable. You just got to spend more time. So you said 10 sets per muscle group per week. That's a pretty
Mm-hmm.
standard number. The range will fluctuate depending on what year you're in. Like generally, it's been 10 to 20 work sets per muscle group per week for the last 5 years or so. 10 to me is a really good starting number. 20 is pretty absurd. I've never done 20, at least targeted work. But just think about it this way. If you're doing 10 sets per week, bicep curls, if you just did 3 days of gym training with 3 sets of bicep curl on each day and one day has an extra set, you just check that box. The only thing I'll add to hypertrophy training that I guess you might get to is that this is where failure does matter if you want to min max your hypertrophy. You don't need to take every set to failure, but taking your sets close to failure and even some of them to absolute failure once you feel like you're safe enough to start doing that, that will definitely yield better results for hypertrophy. And the reason is you want to feel a burn in your muscle. When you can feel that burn in your muscle, you feel like that weight is really slowing down and you're trying really hard to move it and it's just like it's not going that great. you have provided your body with the right signals to get bigger muscles. And so if you strive for that sensation within a certain rep range, which is 5 to 30 reps, but like I'm a big fan of the classic, like 8 to 12, 8 to 15, you're going to get bigger. You're going to reach your goal.
And then lastly, he touches on, or he recaps that the guidelines touch on eccentric focus work. And so that is going to be the down phase of the movement. Returning to your resting spot is more of the focus. And the idea with that is kind of like Christian was alluding to, training to more of that failure standpoint is giving the correct stimulus to the muscles and the hormones that trigger anabolic processes. That is what builds the muscle back up, needs to be there. And eccentric loads seem to show more stress to that local area. And so we're going to be, I guess, assuring or trying to assure that we are getting that signal out there to the body to say, hey, build me back up stronger, right? So that's the idea with the eccentric load as well. Things that he said not to focus on, or that the guidelines say don't focus on. I probably shouldn't put this in Adam's words. This is what the guidelines say per his social media post, is frequency when volume is matched. Okay, so when we're doing that amount of volume, just all it matters is that we're doing the volume throughout the week versus having it very frequent, right? Training low versus high loads. We just want to reach those rep ranges, right? Again, he throws in blood flow restriction. Again, he throws in time under tension. Here he discusses exercise order, isn't much to worry about. Periodization, and so how you're planning out your workouts over like a long-term process. Power training, I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that power training was something we previously focused on when it comes to hypertrophy. And then I didn't mean to set you up for this, Christian. I didn't even look at what it said in terms of not to worry about before we talked about it. And so I did not mean to set you up here, but I will give you a chance to rebuttal or double down. He also says that the guidelines say not to worry about training to failure. So I will say right now, I'm with you on that, but any thoughts on the apparent not to worry about training to failure when it comes to hypertrophy based on the new ACSM exercise guidelines?
Yeah. By saying don't train to failure, you make it less scary for people. And so they're more likely to do it.
It's fair.
And like how big is the magnitude of benefit by training to failure or training just before failure? Going to failure is not going to result in substantial gains compared to training very close to failure. But the reason I made that caveat earlier was because if you were the kind of person who wanted to min max and actually eke out a bit more progress in your workouts, train to failure sometimes with hypertrophy work is going to give you better results. It very likely will. It does come at a slightly increased fatigue burden, like I mentioned with strength earlier, but it's not nearly as bad because these are usually single joint movements. It's like bicep curls, hamstring curls, quad extensions. That's where it's pretty chill to do that. I'm not advocating for folks going to barbell back squats to failure. Yes, you can do that. Do not recommend most folks do that. But yeah, again, like this is for beginners and they want you to not think about really anything. The only thing I wanted to circle back to was where he said, don't think about load. Did I hear that correctly?
Low versus high loads. Yep.
Low versus high loads. Okay. Yeah. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's like strength where they said you really should be trying to train to 80% of your 1 rep max. When it comes to hypertrophy training, it's pretty much the same thing. Like you can't just do 15 reps at whatever weight and say, oh, because I'm in a rep range, I'm now going to get the result that comes with that rep range. No, it's doing that rep range with the amount of weight that gives you those uncomfortable feelings in your muscles. So like you have to have a high enough weight to elicit that discomfort in your muscle or like to slow down the speed of the movement. That is how you know you've selected enough weight in that rep range to get the result that you seek. If you don't do that, you are wasting your time. And so like I just wanted to make sure I'm picky with the low versus high load. Generally, people will say that as like, oh, let's do very heavy bicep curls for 5 to 8 reps or 5 to 10 reps, or let's do very light bicep curls for 15 to 20 or 15 to 30 reps. That distinction doesn't really matter. You can do whichever one you want. Then it just really comes to, well, what the hell do you want to do? What's going to fit into your schedule? It's like going back to your point or comment on focusing on eccentric training. Look, eccentrics do show some extra benefit for strength or hypertrophy in some studies, but others they don't. And like, how long are you going to exaggerate this eccentric? Is it a 2-second eccentric, a 3-second, a 5, or a 10? They've studied all these different times, and they all seem to yield results. So you could, if you wanted to be this person, you could do hypertrophy work for 30 reps with a 5-second eccentric on each rep. But good luck getting anything else done that day. So like at some point, you gotta freaking figure out how you're gonna make this work for someone. And so when I'm writing a program for someone, I'm like, okay, they're gonna give me 3 days a week. They're gonna give me 1 hour each day. They want their booty to be bigger, their biceps bigger. They want to squat. They also want to deadlift. They also want to jump and use a sled. Okay, and they want to also move quickly, keep their heart rate up. I can't have them do 30 reps, 5-second eccentric bicep curls. They're not going to get anywhere in the gym. They're going to get 2 things done. And so like, I got to make sure I'm keeping this very fun for people and getting the results that they want by playing with all those different guidelines we've talked about into a coherent, cohesive package. And for me, I almost always am going to land on 2 to 4 sets, mostly 3 sets of 8 to 15 reps taken to a pretty darn good burn.
Yeah, I think it's
So
important to
I
keep
got
in mind.
freaking heated there for a bit.
No, I think it's good to keep in mind practicality, right? I think that sometimes you see things, it's like, whether it's the skill of the movement, the weight of the movement, the speed, the frequency or volume, and it's like, that's great for people that can devote 4 or 5 days a week, up to 2 hours at the gym. But most people you meet and work with in the real world can't do that. And so it's all about efficiency of the workout and still accomplishing what they want to do in their goals. And so I think it's good to clarify that. And anyways, no, that was a very much appropriate rant that you went on there, Christian. That was good. All right. So optimizing power, last one. So we have strength, hypertrophy, now power. So focusing on loads of 30 to 70%, 1 rep max, moving fast, low to moderate volume. Olympic lifts can help. All right. So I'll touch on that last one, Olympic lifts. What are those? Those are going to be your clean and jerk, your snatch, and different variations of those, right? Those are pretty high skill movements. In regards to individuals who are novice lifters or getting into working out for the first time, I wouldn't say I'd give them snatch or clean and jerk or even a clean or even a hang clean to start unless it was supervised and we were breaking it down very slowly. But in regards to creating more power within your musculoskeletal system, Olympic lifts do seem to show benefit. Moderate loads. I could be wrong, but if I went back and looked at my kind of Foundations of Strength and Conditioning textbook from the I feel like it was a little bit higher than that in regards to being still power is like 80 plus 1 rep max. So this kind of 30 to 70 range, I feel it kind of took me by surprise a little bit, going a lot of bit lighter than what I originally thought of. What do you think about that, Christian?
It all works, and it depends on what you're trying to train. So I'm not an expert in power training, even though like mostly what I do are Olympic lifts, so snatch, clean and jerk, and their variations. But I unfortunately don't get to do a lot of that stuff with the clients that I work with. So when it comes to training power, you got to think about what is the goal of the exercise. So moving fast is really cool and all. That's often the primary goal of power. But when you move fast under low loads, like let's say 30%, you only have enough time to recruit some of the muscle fibers of the muscles being used in the exercise. Let's say it's a broad jump. In order for you to access all of the muscle fibers in, let's say, your quads for the broad jump, you will need to go to heavier weights over time because there are some motor units in your quads that require more weight in order to be signaled, meaning that like the ones that normally go at lower weights can't do it on their own, or they're fatigued and now your body is forced to use the other ones that are there as backups. And so when you train power, you need to have variation in the loads that you use. The intent is always the same. The intent is always to move fast, to move as hard and explosive as you can, and the intent matters a lot. You need to be trying to move with all your might. That is how you signal the nervous system to recruit those motor units. But then you must also vary the weights that you use to access those motor units. So I think that's what they're probably getting at.
Yeah, and that makes sense for why it's such a wide range. And the other thing that I just want to touch on, one thing quickly, as to the reason why we want to look at the two other ones, moving fast and then low to moderate volume. Yes, this is a muscular recruitment idea, but it's also a energetic pathway, a physiological pathway in the body. So that's called our glycolytic system, right? That's how we create quick power that is not sustained. It's a quick movement, it's powerful, but it's meant to happen here, now, bam, done, moving on, right? And so when we train that, we have to train in that way, is a quick, powerful movement, hence quick movements. And the reason why it's not a whole lot of volume is because if you were doing this over and over and over again, these quick, powerful movements over and over and over again, we're going to burn out that system, even to the point where we're probably not even restoring that system when we continue to train it rep after rep, right? At some point, if you just started to do broad jump after broad jump, and you're just doing one after another for minutes, you start to get more into like our oxidative states, more of that endurance state, right? You're just kind of hopping around at that point. Whereas like a box jump, for example, when you do a box jump, you want to be explosive, quick, bam, you get that box jump, whatever it is, 15, 20, 24-inch box jump. And then you want to get off and you want to rest for a little bit between each rep because you want that energetic, that physiological pathway, that glycolytic pathway to restore itself so that when you do the next rep, bam, you do it again. And so you use that same pathway. So part of this is that we're trying to train the pathways of energy to get more efficient and ways to use them versus just doing the movements over and over and over and over again. And so that's kind of the purpose behind that intent as well. And so I think that these guidelines really reflect for power what I've kind of always known. I mean, outside of the 1 rep max stuff, but that's, I think your explanation on that, Christian, is well said. So again, with this one, he talks, or the guidelines talk about not needing to focus on training to failure, periodization, exercise order, and frequency at which we do it. So low to moderate loads, move fast, low to moderate volumes, and doing Olympic style lifts can help.
Yeah, with power is pretty awesome. It doesn't take much to get power development, and you shouldn't do that much. The whole
Mm-hmm.
point of power is you do enough to feel that nervous system fatigue, but you won't really feel muscular fatigue. You'll just feel your performance drop. The
Yeah.
barbell moves slower. You don't jump as high or as far. Even when you've taken several minutes of rest for your body to replenish the glycolytic system and the phosphagen system, which is like that really quick burst for like 5 seconds. The more you do, the worse you perform and the less power you are actually training. You then begin to train power endurance, which is like just like half-ass power training. And that's fine to some extent if you're a CrossFitter or like other sports that use that. But like basketball, for example, you gotta be able to jump pretty high many, many times in a single game. But for that maximal power output, which is what most of our clients really need to work on, it doesn't take much. Like I'll do
Mm-hmm.
3 sets of 3. You know what I mean? 3 sets of 3, vertical jump, broad jump, clapping push-ups, that kind of stuff. Just max effort, violent effort, control the landing if you're jumping, and then like that's it. You just chill. It's pretty
Yep.
pretty easy. It feels good, actually. Power training is awesome because you don't feel like you do much and it's not that tiring, but you get a
It's
lot of
fun.
benefit. It's fun. Yeah.
Exactly. So then lastly, he talks about limitations to consider is that much of the evidence has come from, like you touched on earlier, Christian, novice or untrained subjects, that the quality of the included reviews did kind of vary quite a bit. And some of the outcomes had insufficient data to draw conclusions from. And so there are some limitations to the reviews and to the, I guess, the research that the guidelines are based off of. But I think in general, though, it's pretty straightforward. You know, I think really, if anything, what this review tells us is like, if you're a novice lifter or working out and you're looking on social media or, hearing from a friend about what they're doing and you're like, that sounds intense. It sounds intimidating. I don't know if I want to do that. I think I'm going to get hurt if I do that. The good news is you don't have to do that. We can do a lot more simple, effective, fun things that we can vary in to match what your interests are, and you're gonna get better by doing it. So overall, I liked the new guidelines that have come out. I think they're really beneficial, and I'm looking forward to implementing them not only as a personal trainer, but also as a physical therapist.
Yeah, I think they're spot on. I like them a lot.
Perfect.
They
All right,
really just
Christian.
confirm my biases already, which is kind of great. So
Yeah, I know.
I like
It
that I
is
don't have to
nice when
change
that
what I'm
happens.
doing. Like I'm doing it pretty
Yeah.
good, you know.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, so I would agree. But all right, man. Well, until next time, we'll chat again. But have a good rest of your night, and we'll talk later.
All right, man. Thank you. See ya.
See ya.